Thank you so much for being here,
Thank you
everyone.
so much for
You're
being
here for
here.
the webinar Beyond SNAP, Stories and Strategies for Systemic Change, hosted by Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems Funders, or SAFSF. My name is Maggie Mascarenas, and I'm the Policy Program Manager here at SAFSF. And as we get started today, some of you I think kind of already started to do that, but please add your name, organization, location, and your favorite summer crop to the chat to get us started here. But yeah, thank you so much again for being here. You can see that we're recording today's conversation and we're going to share it out with all registrants in the coming days. But it's incredibly important that funders hear directly from the communities and leaders who are organizing and building sovereign food systems that are essential in our ability to combat authoritarianism and the political weaponization of hunger. So today we're going to hear from four members of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, or NBFJA. And for anyone not already familiar, NBFJA is a coalition of Black-led organizations developing Black leadership, supporting Black communities, organizing Black self-determination, and building institutions for Black food sovereignty and liberation. The coalition members we're going to hear from today are Duran Chavis, farmer, founder, and director at Happily Natural; Maria Dominique Villanueva, farmer and executive of vision and strategy at Fountain Height Farms Cooperatives; Ryan Tenney, farmer and co-director at Sankara Farms; Chris Lemons, farmer and founder of Gratitude Botanical Farm, as well as director of operations at Eco Paradigm; and also Cicely Garrett, co-executive director of NBFJA, who's going to be moderating today's conversation. So together, they're going to tell the story of NBFJA's Beyond SNAP campaign, share more about their work building resilient communal food systems rooted in justice, and explore how funders can support this essential work. Throughout, we're also going to be playing a bingo game, so we very much encourage you to stay for the full 90 minutes. And we're also going to have some time for Q&A towards the end, so please feel free to pop any questions you have in the chat as we go. But with that, I'm going to pass things over to Cicely, and thanks again for being here, y'all.
Thank you, Maggie. Good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate you joining us this afternoon. Um, if at any moment you have questions or thoughts, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we can answer them at the appropriate moments. Just want to acknowledge that several of my comrades are in the room. So if at any point you have a need for more information, they'll also be sharing links with you in the chat. So Leanne is here from National Black Food and Justice Alliance. Also, Salifu is on board, in addition to our member speakers that you can see. So if you need anything during our time together, feel free to chat with them as well, and they'll be here to back me up. So as Maggie mentioned, we are the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. Um, I have several colleagues in the room, but I also have the pleasure of not ever doing this alone. I have a co-executive director with Dr. Jasmine Jackson, who may join us at some point. And we also have the benefit of a beautiful coalition of members. Four of the member representatives are here with me today. We have over 60 member representatives in our network. They're organizational members of local and regional Black food, land, and justice organizations. We also have about 20 cultivators, 2025 cultivators are individual members. These are some of our Black academics, people who used to work at other organizations but still want to support our work there in space. And so you can find out more about those on our website, and we'll be sure to share our annual impact report link before we leave if you want to learn more about that. Um, And so, why we do what we do. I just want to say on the outset that we recognize the First Nations of this land, and we stand in solidarity with their struggle towards land reclamation, rematriation, and sovereignty. Our focus, particularly around Black land and food systems and food sovereignty, is there because we are in a crisis in a moment of the moment. We live under a corporate dominated food systems that prioritizes and the maximization of profit over human life. The system is extractive and exploitive and deeply anti-Black. In the US, We have witnessed the systemic dismantling of Black land ownership in both the rural and urban contexts. And at the same time, our Black foodways, why we eat, how we eat, what we eat, what it means, are disappearing. So with lack of access to and control over the production, distribution, and consumption of the food that we consider to be healthy and grown ecologically sustainable ways. Um, and so we live in the aftermath of the deindustrialization and the gutting of the infrastructure that's withering away of our societal safety nets. And so the problem we felt like was lack of organization. And so the National Black Food and Justice Alliance offers an opportunity to build self-determined food systems and work towards Black food sovereignty. Our areas of focus include Black food sovereignty, self-determining food economies, where you'll find a lot of our co-op work, and land. And we approach food sovereignty, land, and self-determining food economies through the lens of organizing people, building institutions, and amplifying culture. So we'll spend most of our time today talking about SNAP and some of the responses to it and how we see what we call beyond SNAP, the initial SNAP crisis this fall. But I think it helpful to sort of ground us in a few of the terms and why we use them. And so for us, instead of uh, what we would call food deserts, or another term that you may hear out there is food insecurity. Um, we don't particularly use those words to describe some of our work because they sound accidental instead of intentional. Deserts are things that are created by nature versus intentional policies and actions that have created what we call quote unquote food deserts and food insecurity. Um, and so today we use the language of food apartheid, which was coined by food justice organizer and farmer Karen Washington. It helps us name this truth much more plainly than I think some of the other terms that have been used. Um, the inequitable distribution of food is intentional and designed through zoning, disinvestment, corporate consolidation, and racialized policy decisions. It is not a desert called by nature. It is a segregation created by power. And so I think it is important that if we talk about a thing to truly name what it is, because then that also deems what our response will be and colors that. And we've had a long history, and some of the poignant moments are noted on this slide. Um, with USDA and discrimination that the Pickford settlements settled out. And we'll drop in the chat if you want to have a longer foray into the history. We have a Land, Food, and Freedom journal that we've been producing twice a year. And it has the first article, gives you a very detailed history of land and Black land and its effect on communities and policies and violent policies that have shifted that. There is also a very deep and aligned writing from Indian Collective as well around their work with Indigenous people within the land issues. So I invite you to read that and follow up with it after our time together today. So food apartheid continues today within our communities and things that we see. And so hunger is not just the result of individual failure or poor choices, as we are often touted in the media around, people just make different choices. And I would argue that it's hard to make a better choice when you don't have better things available for you to from which you to make choices from. The power of choice is often determined by people's zip code, by their race, by where they're located, and ultimately everyone should have the same power of choice, regardless of zip code or economic standard, or where they are, their socioeconomic status. And so it is the outcome of policy decisions that are often shaped by racial capitalism, dispossession, and a long history of denying Black people the ability to feed ourselves. And so this is why we use the term food apartheid. And you'll hear some of that weave throughout today about why we choose this path in naming our work and the conditions in which we are combating. So we're here today to talk some about Beyond SNAP. I think many of you participated in a work group that was a response, to what was the SNAP crisis that happened this past fall. Um, and just to give a little background for some of those who may be new to it, SNAP is Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. So it is meant to be a supplement, not anyone's full budget. Um, and it currently serves about 42 million people. Was created in the 60s as a number of reform and subsidy programs were coming online. But currently, 1 in 8 people in the US rely on SNAPs to feed themselves and families. And for a lot of people, this SNAP just isn't a supplement to their budget, it is their whole food budget because this often allows them to use much needed funds for housing and transportation and other critical needs. And so this becomes the whole of their budget. My early on career here, I live in Atlanta, I was working at the Atlanta Community Food Bank. The majority of people who come to food banks, most of the people on SNAP are actually working adults and families. And so, just the typical face of who people think it is who is experiencing hunger and not often doesn't coincide with what is told to us. Um, Research also shows that every dollar spent on SNAP generates about $1.54 of economic activity. However, for every dollar spent on local food, there is between $1.50 and $3 of economic activity generated within the community. So we think about the potential possibilities of the economic impact that SNAP has and those who use SNAP, and what that would look like if it was really supporting a regional and local food system. There's so much great potential there that is untapped. And when we look at who is on SNAP, it is our most vulnerable of populations with children and elders and disabled people and low-wage workers. That I think it demands more of our attention than it was getting prior to the SNAP crisis that came about in the fall. So when our ability to eat depends on the political negotiations, hunger then becomes a tool of governance rather than a state of the people. What the SNAP crisis revealed is what we often thought was a safety net and was a given. SNAP is one of the most efficient government programs with only about a 3% or less error rate. And a lot of that is not actually due to fraud, it's just due to paperwork and like other missteps of why people get put on and put off. But something that was quote unquote as solid as that, it sort of signals to us that nothing is safe. Um, it is a system whose openings and closures are controlled by people in power and not by the community and based on the need that is there. And so, with every budget standoff, every court ruling, every administrative decision, that net tightens or loosens rather than just remains as a mainstay. And so, it's reminding us that the state can retract care and also easily provide it. And so, in the wake of the SNAP crisis, being a membership org of other membership orgs who support the local and regional food systems, many of them frontline organizations, we did what we do. We got together as members, we organized about what our response would be to this. And so, in response to the SNAP halt, all of our members got together and we asked, like, what should we collectively do in real time and how can we be prepared for this? And quite frankly, how long could we even be a band-aid, if even a small one within the system? So in addition to releasing a public statement in November, we also organized, and due to an anonymous donor, we had already planned to just take out of our reserves, but an anonymous donor came along as well to supplement some of that. We expanded our mutual aid. Um, and to support farmers and other co-op and other food serving organizations within our network so that they could extend their farm season and also offer ability to continue to feed their communities through food distributions and other stuff, but also make sure that they were cared for in the process. We also launched the Beyond Snaps campaign on our social media, which we'll get into in a few moments, and some of you may have already seen. And so members were able to share how communities were responding through mutual aid, cooperative distribution, local growing, and collective care. And what does that look like? Um, and then we were just very clear that like this was a moment in time, but not the all of it. The system that we had was not perfect to begin with. And so just relying on going back to that, quite frankly, wasn't good enough and not some place that we should be comfortable in and live. And so mutual aid networks, land stewards, co-ops, and Black growers carried our communities through this crisis. Um, and to be quite honest, it was a manufactured crisis. It wasn't something by circumstance or natural disaster that occurred. It was manufactured by the dealings and going ons within our political discourse. Um, and quite frankly, the state abandoned its people in the process. And so for us, care is not charity. It is our greatest community defense if we are to not only survive, but thrive and persevere, aka be resilient in this time and beyond. Um, oh, sorry, it's going in the wrong direction. So I would like to share in a few moments some of our stories and for you to hear directly from our members about how they are responding within their communities and what we should be looking toward beyond SNAP and beyond inadequate safety nets to really, really build a strong resilient food system that is governed by the people in which it is meant to feed and care for. One of the other things that we also launched as part of our Beyond SNAP campaign is we wanted to produce more tangible materials that others could use in their community so that they could become advocates for themselves and be more knowledgeable around just the policies, the food systems, the things that were impacting and causing not only the moment, but beyond, and how they could become more savvy to be in this conversation and not just be a pawn within it. In addition to some leaflets and stuff that people can hand out, we also have been in production with a food is political bingo game that people could play with people during food distributions or just doing community learnings and political education. Um, we have adapted this, and for the first time today, we are going to attempt, if showed you so choose, to follow along with us with this in real time. This is a QR code, and I also think Slifu or Leanne will drop in the chat a link to the bingo. We'll pause throughout while we're speaking today and offer up just some highlights if you would like to look for some things on your card. Our communications and culture staff will also drop some hints into the chat at the end of each section if you'd like to play along. But yeah, we've adapted it digitally, so hopefully we can use it virtually and in person. But these are some of the other things that we're continuing to do and not just letting that moment in time pass us in the fall, but really using this to educate and inform people to harness their own power and speak for themselves beyond the initial SNAP crisis. Um, so first up, I wanted to give and showcase some of our Beyond SNAP campaign videos, and we'll talk.
We're not so much a band-aid for SNAP. We're not trying to eat better under imperialism. We're actually trying to renew the earth. My name is Ryan Tenney. Sankara Farm is my farm based in Kansas City, Missouri. I call myself a farmer and a cultural worker. Sometimes those things it sounds like it's redundant because farming is cultural work. From a more philosophical position, there's there's a phrase to see the earth before the end of the world, and it's kind of like a call to a planetary inhabitation rather than occupying states and the layer of world that has been imposed upon the earth. This is a planet, and we're earthlings along with so many other beings, and so it's kind of incumbent upon social movements in the United States to go see our cousins. In this hemisphere, food sovereignty has been one of the pillars of social movements since the 80s, coming out of Brazil and Mexico. The reason why Venezuela is going to be able to survive this imperial buildup and continued destabilization campaigns because Venezuela has achieved food sovereignty. There is a spiritual grounding to their radicalism and their anti-imperialism, and it's kind of rooted in that spirit of indigenous ways of knowing, pre-colonial impulses and beliefs. That like this planet is also our kin, and that's like a global consciousness.
So I'm going to have come join me on the virtual stage, Ryan. Ryan is a member of our leadership team, which is also like our board, is also the founder and steward of Sankara Farms in Kansas City, Missouri. Some of you, if you went to one of the SAFS summits, oh, might have been pre-COVID or right after COVID, you may have visited Ryan's farm. Um, Ryan is also like a brilliant artist and just culture curator within our midst. So we are very fortunate to have Ryan with us. And Ryan, I'm just curious, you also came back from an artist in residence in Nigeria recently, or sorry, Ghana. Um, and so just curious, you speak a lot around just food systems, not just here on Turtle Island, but beyond, and the importance of the role some of those lessons play uh, for us here and beyond, and the connectedness of it all, as well as our connectedness to be in harmony with nature and the earth. Um, and so I'm curious for you. When we think about achieving food sovereignty and the role it plays, or the hindrances maybe with while or places are going through civil unrest, if you could just speak to some of the ability for food sovereignty to be able to combat authoritarianism, or just some of the the social and political things that we face both here in our country, or even abroad, if you'd like to speak on that.
Mhm. Oh, definitely, definitely. Well, thank you, Cecily. It was a really great overview of SNAP and where how we got here. That you gave in the beginning, and thanks to SASF and everybody for joining the call. Um, I think food sovereignty is definitely a benefit to people's certainly assist in securing, which is kind of the basis of reforming societies, the basis of revolutionizing the relations to productive forces, the relations to labor. Uh, yeah, this access to land, beginning in our context, urban gardening, small gardens, market gardens. But on the African context, it was a whole country, and folks had family land, but it was also the policy struggle uh, around what's incentivized to grow. In Nigeria, there were large palm oil plantations as well as local production of cassava, yam, um, papaya. So it was a diversified production, which is what I saw over there. Something that we could achieve or strive for here. Um, rural and urban working both together um, to build something that looks like land reform, even if we know that's not going to come from the state. It's something that we can uh, gradually build like a compost pile. You know. Uh, I don't know how long I have, but I don't know, maybe if you want to give me another question.
No, I think you're good. So Ryan's going to come back with us. All of our speakers will be back at the end. I'm going to drop into another video from Dominique Villanueva from Alabama. And then we'll come back with another question. Appreciate you, Ryan. If you have questions for Ryan and things that you would like to know further, feel free to go ahead and drop those in the chat, and we'll be sure to get to those during our Q&A in a few moments.
We have never lived in a nation, in a state, in a city, in a neighborhood that has been fully supported by any, government or political power. We cannot forget that the ultimate goal is our own liberation and our own sovereignty. My name is Maria Dominique Villanueva, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm here in beautiful, historic Fountain Heights, Birmingham, Alabama, and I am one of the co-founders of Fountain Heights Farms Cooperative, a multi-urban farm space here in Birmingham. I wish that I would have recruited more of our neighbors to grow their own food. And so, next season we'll be looking into that more of like, well, how do we not only do the work that we're doing on the farm, but how do we translate that into people's homes? Although SNAP is a really big, a huge program that helps a lot of families, it doesn't close all the gaps, and it doesn't serve all of the people who are in need of food access and food assistance. Until we remember our power and remember our beloved ancestors that remind us again and again of the struggles, their own struggles, and our own skills, we will always be at the mercy of these systems and individuals who would keep us in these kinds of bonds.
Thank you. So up next we have Dominique, who is both a farmer and co-visionary of Fountain Heights Farms Cooperative in Birmingham, Alabama, and many, many more things. Super duper mom of some really cute little people who are always in tow at the farm, and wears many, many hats. So that's one title, but there's 10 or 15 more that she does on a daily basis. And I wondered, Dominique, if you could speak to some of the gaps not filled by SNAP and the critical role local and regional food systems and providers like yourself play in filling those roles and support needed to really meet the needs of the community, because your work largely grew up out of just seeing a need in your community and starting to do something right there in the immediate blocks and empty lots adjacent to your home.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I was on SNAP at the time that we moved into Fountain Heights and started growing food for ourselves because it wasn't meeting all of the needs that I had at the time for me and my family. Um, I think that, there are all of these hidden or invisibilized groups of people who are not served or underserved by SNAP, and it's definitely working families, but it's also, people who have been formerly incarcerated, undocumented neighbors, people who are, man, when I when I went back to renew and I was $17 over the threshold of being able to qualify, and I cried in that office because that was $17 was the difference between me being able to feed my children well. Um, and so, I think there's all of those people, college students, adults without children, right, who they have time limits on being able to access, and all of those people have been invisibilized in this system where we say we have this safety net. And frankly, we've poured billions into SNAP. We've poured billions into food banks for decades, and we really haven't moved the needle on hunger, and particularly hunger in Alabama. And I think that really speaks to how important it is to remember that these SNAP programs, these food banks, they were not meant to be a permanent infrastructure. They were always meant to be an emergency response. And we can't let an emergency response become our permanent solution because it lets us off the hook for asking bigger questions, right? Like what are the root causes? And we know those, poverty, wage stagnation, housing, and I mean, we can make a whole long list, but we can't food bank our way out of being disenfranchised and being disinvested in as a community. And we can't snap our way out of not having access to high quality food to feed our families with. Um, we can't, my neighborhood hasn't had a grocery store in almost 70 years, and that's almost three generations of people who have now um, been normalized into shopping in the convenience store and all the, convenience store offers and all that does to our brains and our palates and all of those things. Um, and so I think that that was really special and important that you named Cicely about, it's not it's not really a choice when all you do is get to look at the shelf and pick between this bag or that bag. Um, I think that we don't talk enough about what hunger does to the brain, when you're chronically food insecure, um, our decision making, our, all the, the impulse control, all of these things, having to make decisions under scarcity, under stress, and then, you know, turning around and saying like, oh, well, we have a personal responsibility problem. That's a intellectually dishonest conversation. So, you know, I I'm glad that these conversations are being had. I'm glad, I'm so thankful to be in community with other people who are doing this work around the country. Um, we know that there is a weight that comes with doing this work that, is not talked about a lot, um, because we're navigating in the current system, right? And we're, using the language that we have, and it's very limiting. And we're, applying for the grants and we're, checking the boxes and we're trying to, do the reports and all of that. And we're also building this new thing that we don't have a category for, this healing thing that we don't even have all of the expansiveness of language to be able to describe to people. And as people who work in these food systems and are trying to create this new thing together, we're always having to translate, and the translation doesn't always get through. But I think that when we're talking about, food access or food insecurity or food, underserved communities or however, whatever the kind of missing language is, that's not really what we're doing. We're not solving food insecurity. We are building the framework for our own sovereignty and liberation. And that is a fundamentally different conversation, and it's also its own labor to be standing in those two worlds.
Beautiful. Thank you. If you have questions for Dominique, please feel free to drop those in the chat. We'll share some links if you'd like to connect directly with Fountain Heights Farm Cooperative. But I'm going to drop back in and share a little piece from Brother Duran from Happily Natural Day, and then we'll have a little dialogue.
I'm telling you, like SNAP is great. It's an amazing thing, but as we see, it's not guaranteed. But our people still got to eat. So, that looks like for me us teaching as many of our community members how to grow their own food and getting them access to land to do that. My name is Duran Chavis. I'm the founder, director of Happily Natural Day. It's a 501c3 based in Richmond, Virginia. We've been doing this work since 2003. We've been doing food access, food justice, food sovereignty work since 2008, and land stewardship since 2012. We steward land across Central Virginia, multiple farms and garden sites. We teach community members how to develop farm sites, garden spaces, green spaces, and we also work to acquire land so that folks post-training have space to actually start their farm experience or farm journey. I feel like in this moment, people make a lot of excuses, but everything about this food sovereignty work is communal. So us locking in to the communal networks, everybody's not going to be a farmer, but everybody got to know who the farmer is, and everybody got to have a relationship with him or her, or they. So figuring out how we develop those systems and getting more intuitive towards what is it going to take for us to not be reliant on these government welfare programs is critical.
So joining me is Brother Duran Chavis out of Richmond, Virginia. Also a member of leadership team, news member of leadership team at the Alliance. Everybody has such a storied background. So people choose to do this work, but they have many talents they could apply in a lot of different places and choose to do it here. They most recently have been able, through conservation, leveraging some other tools, bring together about 100 acres of land to co-steward with other land stewards in Central Virginia. Brother Duran has worked at the SNAP office, so he's proved applications, but on the other side of it. Also a historian and artist himself. There's a wonderful festival that happens at the end of August every year for Happily Natural Day. If you're in the area, I encourage you to go partake in. But yeah, so he's come, given his time this afternoon. They're all very busy, but have honored to have them join me this afternoon. And I'm wondering if you could speak to, for the audience, just what would it take for us to not be so reliant on government programs? Being a person who's seen it from all sides of it, and for us to really build resilient communal food networks, food system networks that you speak of in the Beyond SNAP video.
Yes, thank you for priming the pump. Um, yeah, I feel like us eradicating hunger requires us to start practicing the communal nature of relationships and community, like really emphasizing on the communal part of what community speaks to, right? Um, I'll give you an example for us. Our work has been really rooted in getting access to land to grow food. And over the last, I say 14 years, we went from, small community garden owned by the city to now owning, you know, over 150 acres of land. And when we acquired the land, it's one thing for us to have it, but it's another thing for us to actually have the practices uh and people resources to actually steward and grow that food. And that's all that's a muscle memory that we have lost over the generations. So many people have had land stolen from them and they've been dispossessed of it. Um, but us getting back to growing food together, uh, and that abundance that comes along with it is I think an instrumental part of us being less reliant on these government welfare programs. My wife, Nakaya, um, has been going to Uganda for the last 3 years. She does maternal health work, and they've built a village in Uganda for maternal health, for basically a birth village where women come to have their babies. But the culture around agriculture is different from how we look at it here in the States. Everybody farms on in the village, right? You could be the doctor, the guy that checks blood levels. You could be, the taxi cab driver, whatever your role is, it does not supersede the fact that you are going to be helping to grow the food because everybody has to eat in the village. What I've rooted myself in and with that uh, example in mind is that, us having access to land gives us a different set of possibility. When folks take our training, we're able to uh, give them access to an acre, half an acre, 3 acres of land for them to grow food on. And then the arrangement is a different conversation because it's like I don't have to charge you a lease, but I could be like, hey, look, grow whatever you want, but a percentage of what you grow needs to go to this mutual aid food distribution, right? And then that gives that person uh, uh, the freedom to experiment, to learn their farm practices, to evolve, to, try new things. And it gives the community that is in need of food produce without us even having to intersect with SNAP, right? Um, and so I feel like, this conversation about us becoming less reliant on the government requires us to look within and think through, okay, well, how are we relating to each other and building systems of care, systems of support for one another, being provisional unto each other uh, in ways that we haven't thought about prior to there being a SNAP program. I believe all this stuff existed before, these programs existed. And I'm not disclaiming them. I mean, I used to work for social services, right? I sat in the office with mothers, you know, uh, Dominique spoke to folks who come home who have drug-related felonies. I can't tell you how many times I had to tell this person, you did not tell me that you had a drug-related felony. Did you? You did not say that, did you? In order for them to understand that, you are ineligible for this, but you're sleeping on your cousin's couch and you need to have some way to feed yourself. So that type of practice of looking at us as human beings, irrespective of whom and where we come from, but we all have to eat, figuring out ways that we can work together and share in resources that we have access to is the beginnings of us creating these new systems that are so vital. Um, I think, the chaos of government systems, in this current administration has taught me one thing, that we can't rely on it. If it comes down to it, we lived through the pandemic and, food systems being disrupted in that way. But being rooted in we can solve these problems, we can be provisional towards one another. by working together, holding hands in this thing. Everybody's not going to be a farmer, but there's somebody that's going to help with the aggregation of the produce. There's somebody that's going to turn that produce into a value-added product. There's somebody that's going to help us market the program. Somebody that's going to help, with the actual packaging of the produce that goes out to people. Like we have all the things that we need. It's just about us having a reevaluation of how we share and get out of this mindset of rugged individualism and, silos. Like this work is intersectional. There's folks that are experiencing affordable housing issues, folks that are experiencing health related issues. There's people that are experiencing, problems with the legal system, but everybody has to eat no matter what their gender, religious background, ethnicity, or what their social circumstances. So yeah, I just say that, we just have to learn how to be more communal and use the resources that we have access to. And then uh invest in the infrastructure in the built environment, right? I'm from the city, so we build these urban farms, but when it comes to growing on a larger scale, we, you know, acquire land more rurally as well. And that rural land serves as a aspiration, a scaled up version of what's happening in a city. So what's growing in the rural community can be trafficked into the city for distribution. So yeah, it's just about being more communal and power mapping our relationships and being provisional and caring about each other really. And we're not just numbers in, somebody's SNAP database or what have you. These are real lives that are impacted by these policies.
Thank you, brother. Always appreciate your words and wisdom. And so we're gonna drop back in for one last video, but certainly not least. Um, it's from Brother Chris Lemons, from where I reside in Atlanta, born and raised. Chris is, well, I'll give a little background after we watch the video. So let's watch the video first, and then I'll introduce Chris.
I'm gonna keep it real with you, man. We need to tap back into some of our fables, um, and some of our proverbs that we was raised up with. And I'm sure you remember the story of the grasshopper and the ant. So for context, there's a grasshopper and there's an ant. And the ant is always diligent towards building, making sure that it's prepared. And the entire time that winter is coming, the grasshopper is playing. It's on Instagram, it's on TikTok. Hey, we got the stamps back. The grasshopper ultimately had to suffer because of not being provisioned and not being prepared. My name is Chris Lemons. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. It's home for me, part of a collective called Eco Paradigm, where we support farms, growers of all types around the South and nationally, with different infrastructure, labor support projects on farms. I also have a farm that's going into year 8 actually now. Can't believe I'm saying that, but it's called Gratitude Botanical Farm. We are the space where you really need to be more like that ant, and a lot less like that grasshopper. For me, and my wildest dream is that within our food system is that we own it all, and that we're able to provide that value back into our community, into our neighborhood. Back in the days for our grandfathers and great grandfathers, we used to get together and work out a plan to come together. So, having a little bit more cooperative networks, I think that's something that's big for me.
So I've had the pleasure of knowing Chris many, many years. It actually predates my time at the Alliance. I met Chris when he was in the early days of Botanical Gratitude Botanical Farms. And so I had the pleasure of working with him when I worked for the City of Atlanta's mayor's office, as the Chief Resilience Officer. And then had fortune for our paths to cross again. Chris and Eco Paradigm provide support to hundreds of farms throughout the South and Southeast of the U.S., both farm labor, farm infrastructure. If you need something built, repaired, they show up. They show up with a team and get the job done. Chris also maintains and runs his own organic farm within the city of Atlanta. Is always open and willing to teach, invite people in, and just speak from a level and a place of realness and just lived experience that is so rich and valuable to have in this. Um, and so, I'm grateful to have Chris here to share his experience with this and being on all sides of it as well. At times, a administrator of things, but also always a steward of the land. Um, and you have the fortune to be able to live and work in the community in which you grew up, as well as go to other communities. And so I wonder when you talked about what it would mean in the video to live your wildest dream when it comes to food systems and food sovereignty. And so I wonder what would that look like, and what type of support would it take to make that happen?
Sure. Thank you for having me on, and good afternoon to everybody. For me, Cicely, just to be forthright, fix this broken system and for us to have a closed loop. Um, and so when I say that, I mean to where for me, I don't have to drive 10 miles every day to go to the farm, and drive 10 miles back. When you think about that over the course of the week, that's 100 miles that I've driven, just to be out there on the farm. So having things in place where people are able to have, number one, housing access. I think that we can solve a lot of our problems with the way that we manage our land, with just maybe even having collective purchases and deciding that in the same way that we have people, in our state, they're building out subdivisions that are for lease only, and so in the same way, why not give that equity back to the people and be able to build out communities and villages um, where people do have food access and have that housing access. And it's not anything that's necessarily income dependent or monitoring dependent. Those are some things that I think about. Even when we look at something, like agroforestry, or for example, them expanding the interstate into the right of way of my farm. Why can't some of that lumber or timber that's being harvested be used to create sustainable housing, or, planter boxes and raised beds? So that's part of the wildest dream for me. And then from there, it's also looking at how we can collectively use like waste to create sustainable compost that people can have access to, so we can help remediate our soils. And just knowing that our nutrients are that depleted out of our soil, excuse me, is something that I think we definitely need to work on doing. And then for me, also just having it where people think about food and community a little bit differently. So many people are on making ends meet survival mode that they can't think about, healthy choices. Or as Dominique said earlier, when you have people that are living in nutrient deficient ways, you can't process. Your nervous system literally does not have the vitamins and minerals it needs to self-regulate. So even having things in place to where we could talk about that. But then I would also lift up in my wildest dream is that, coming live from the so-called Black Mecca, um, just having it to where we don't have as much class control over our food and over our systems and what people have to look like and experience in order to access that. For us, working with Eco Paradigm, a lot of times we do get looks when we're going around and helping people or working on farms. It's kind of like, how do you guys, make a living, or what do you guys do? But when you think about the breadth of skills that my team brings to the table, you would be hard pressed to replicate that. I would wager. So those are some things for me that I think about in the short immediacy. But then also when we talk about just in our what we can really be doing, giving farmers and growers more access to seeds, having more seed banking, those types of things. We know that right now it's us versus them when we're looking at the system and the way things are going right now. And many of us have made intentional divestments from this system in order to build out a new world, once this passes. I have a friend of mine that keeps telling me, you know, to stay positive because all of this is already passed. This is just the wickedness and its death throes. You know, at the end of the day, this it'll go dark for a minute, but when we look back up, the systems that we're talking about creating today, those will have manifested, and hopefully we can live on a more peaceful and resilient earth. And then lastly, for me, when we're just talking about, our children and the next generation, I have a nephew who's 6 years old. I'm 40. And so what does the world look like for him when he's 40? We talk about just having a healthy earth, food access, and then just being in a more just place. What does that look like now? We know that we have days down in Atlanta where like 105 in the summer is normal. What does that look like 36 years from now? And so for us paying it forward and doing what we have to do to overcome the people that look to oppress us. I'm trying to keep it light. But ultimately, for me, as a child of Atlanta, as a child of Georgia, and in the South, just that oppression that we consistently have to face, that we have to rely on our resilience and ourselves in order to build out these better systems. So I'll leave it at that. I know we have about 30 minutes left. So
Thank you. I appreciate you,
Mhm.
and all of our speakers. We are going to move to Q&A now. If you have any questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can use the hand raise, and we'll acknowledge you and bring you back in. In a moment, I'll drop screen and bring all of our speakers back to the stage. As people are thinking about their questions and getting together, just want to have a moment. If you have been playing along with bingo, um, Salifu or Leanne or Jazz will drop into the chat. I don't know if anyone wants to raise their hand and talk about any phrases that they've seen come up, or you can drop those into the chat if you want to do a check-in on your bingo card, to see where you are, if you've heard any things that spark for you or things that mimic the card. We'll give a few moments for that, while people get questions ready, and my speakers come back into view. Yes, the bingo card. I think Sleepo and then we'll drop the link again. So we have all of our speakers back on stage. Oh, we do have a question. Thank you, Trina. So nutrient deficiency means we can't regulate our nervous systems. It's so critical to understanding the impacts on our mental health and healing as a community. Can the panel speak more to this?
Dominique, you want to lead us off? Jump in there.
Yeah, I think I tell a lot of stories, so I'm gonna tell a story. Um, we have a pantry, a food pantry on our farm where people can access the food any time of day that they want to, and it's for free. And my husband really had a problem with that because he was like, "Man, we working hard to grow this food, ma'am, and you're just giving it away." And I said, well, just wait. This rock with me for a second. Um, and what we experienced for months was we would load the pantry up and it would literally be gone in, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, um, every single day. And then there came a point in time where um, we would load it up and, things would kind of like trickle out and people would start to be more selective about what they were, taking, and thinking about, who else might need this as well. And I think that we finally have gotten to a place where people know that that is a space to access food when you need it, and it will be there. And so you don't have to take it all because it will continuously be available. And what I heard from my neighbor is that this is the first time that I have been able to have a full refrigerator and my cabinets are full. And there is a level of stress and anxiety um, that comes with no, not knowing like how are you going to put something together. Um, and there is a comfort that comes with knowing that, yes, there is uh, something for me, that someone cares enough to know that I'm not going to just need this once, but there may be a period of time that I'm going to need this for, and they got me. Um, and so I think about that a lot in what everyone I think has spoken to in the ways that we have to continue to remind people that we care, and we will care for each other and we will show up for each other. Um, you wanna take it over, Chris?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. I mean, for me, when we talk about it from like a mental health standpoint, especially when we just in the hood, sometimes, people have mental health. A lot of the food that people have immediate access to comes out of the convenience store. And so when you talk about heavy starches, oils, high sugar, lack of water, those types of things can exacerbate things with mental health. Especially when you just look at what we know about nutrient dense foods at this point and how that can help just regulate our nervous systems and our body as a whole. Um, when I think about it, just in a big way, the gateway drug, that's sugar. And regardless of a lot of people's addictions or things that they may be privy to, they still gonna drink a Coca-Cola and smoke a cigarette. Especially coming out of the neighborhood sometimes. There's things that I just see. And when you think about when we talk about big food, at the end of the day, big food is always guaranteed themselves a check. One way you're gonna touch some sugar, some potatoes, corn, and at some level, for folks that smoke, you're gonna touch that nicotine. And so when we talk about the things that continue to finance our oppression, that's part of it. So, Deron, you got something on it?
No, I mean, I covered it. I was just gonna say, it's nutrient density is linked to mental health issues. Chronic uh, food insecurity has links to bipolar disorder, ADHD, depression, all of the big mental health issues that people experience in community. So yeah, that's a part of the conversation as well, making sure that the soil
Mhm.
that we're growing in has the nutrient density to provide to the plants that we eat. And I mean, it really speaks that question does speak to a bigger, larger macro issue that it's not just people who are on SNAP that are impacted by the quality of food that we have access to in our current food system. And, getting regenerative practices on the table for all farmers, I think is a critical conversation for the health of of all folks, irrespective of class, right? Or locality or where they might find themselves. So yeah, this is the way in which this work hits all of us, irrespective of whether or not you're on SNAP or not.
Thank you. And if you want to stay in there for a moment, a question from Andrew King Bartlett. Hello, Andrew. Um, so in your presentation, Duran, you spoke about the importance of acquiring land. I was wondering, either from yourself or the other speakers, I don't know if Ryan or someone wants to jump in, if you could speak more to how land fits into either your struggles or strategies or both.
So just for us, um, we have really placed a heavy emphasis on land ownership for our community. So we've created our own community land trust that we hold land and issue low cost or no cost leases to farmers who have come through our training programs or farmers that are experiencing land insecurity or beginning farmers. Um, that fits into our struggle because it allows us to build a wider base of growers while at the same time engaging with farmers that are already farming that might be impacted by the pressures of development and urban sprawl that are occurring in our rural communities. Um, so for us, it's really about us having place and building community in place and not being moved. The work of farmers is a longitudinal work. You can't imagine being able to grow abundantly and having to move your farm uh, year to year, right? So us being able to acquire land allows us to have that permanency and build these strategies and refine them over time. And then, also, I'll share that we also use conservation easements as a tool to protect that land and to acquire the capital needed to build the infrastructure on that land so that the farmers can farm with as wide a runway as possible for their success instead of having to bootstrap all of the tools and the equipment and the well digging and the electrical setup and the greenhouse infrastructure, all that different type of stuff.
Anyone else want to respond to the land question about how land fits into either your struggles or strategies?
I, just real quick. I mean, Ron said it all. Land trusts, uh, uh, easements, democratizing that access. And I just want to highlight one thing Chris said earlier. It makes possible agroforestry, which, is like something that urban ag, small farmers can't even really conceive of, because we know we don't have access to long-term land. But agroforestry, which, starts to replicate the systems that are in Uganda, that are in Nigeria, where you have, you know, we got fruit trees and there's more food underneath them. So it makes possible that which is would be a dream for food sovereignty.
Thank you. So we have another question for Claire in the chat. Claire's curious to hear from everyone about what you think about engaging in policy and advocacy and coalition building at a local, state, or federal level. Could be SNAP related, could be something else, in light of the current political landscape and just looking ahead. I'll also acknowledge that Dr. Jazz is on the call. I mentioned is my co-ED, who also leads a lot of our policy and advocacy work. And so welcome to chime in as well, Dr. Jazz, if you have something to say. But yeah, to the panelists, what are your thoughts around still organizing and building in this space, given the current political climate?
I just share my experience. When Trump got reelected, I went to do foreign policy advocacy with the National Family Farm Coalition, and it was a very depressing experience just to see the level of surrender that a lot of our elected officials had assumed or were holding. Talking to aides and folks, they were acting like their hands were tied. So that energy for me turned me personally away from even trying to walk up and into those rooms because the people that were supposed to be representing us seemed to have given up. And you know, I live in two realms. It's like I'm trying to build the world that exists after this one collapses, while also respecting the fact that we need to survive this moment. So, you know, for sake of time and energy and my own mental health, I said, all right, well that's doing that over there. Let me go over here where I have control and I know where we're building power. The folks that are supposed to be advocating on my behalf over there have put up the white flag. So I recognize the importance in staying on, the front line of like policy advocacy, but for my own mental health and energy, like outputs, somebody else gonna have to do it. This is me.
Yeah, I'm with you, Deron. It's funny, we the two Libras. So like, yeah, I definitely would say that it matters up to a point, y'all, that we do have to advocate for those things, and try to push for some of those policies. I could think back to when I worked with Baba Rashid Nuri, founder and former executive director of Truly Living Well. We put out a commendation or proclamation as part of our role on Fulton County Citizens Commission on the Environment about the importance of urban agriculture in Fulton County and people having access to agriculture in Fulton County. The commissioners passed it, but when we talk about toothless wolves, we got to be able to implement a lot of the things that we're advocating for. And then back to Deron's point, for me in Atlanta, I'm super disappointed right now, just from the way the city people in the city are being treated around the World Cup. But just last week, the city council had its budget meeting for the year, and the majority of city council was not there for the meeting. Urban ag, food access, all of those things are voted on. And so, yes, I think that we do have to hold these folks' feet to the fire. But going back to Duran's point, we kind of know what it is at this point. The transparency is there. And so we know that we're going to have to continue to build out those systems, and working together with one another to figure out ways to subvert and divert funding to build out the things that we want to see. Yeah.
But I will say, like, that's just the federal. For me, that was just the federal space. Like state, local, like my city and the state level, like, oh, the gloves is on. There's a lot of space for negotiation. There's a lot of space for power. In Virginia, Abigail Spanberger just, became governor. So like, if you see those pockets, yeah, that's the energy. I'm just trying to go where the energy is most attenuated to what I came to bring, right? And I'm not spending my time trying to convince nobody that we're worthy. I'm not trying to spend no time trying to convince nobody that I'm human. You know what I'm saying? None of
Right.
that shit is relevant to me. You know what I mean? So that's just me. So I just want to put that in there.
I
I,
think I I think a lot of people don't realize what we're working with here in Alabama.
Mhm.
What we're working with is the longest active written constitution in the world. It is so massive. There are so many amendments to it because there is a lack of municipal home rule, which means that cities and counties have basically almost no authority to pass their own local laws without higher state approval. And so I think we're the third blackest city in the nation, or maybe, maybe the fourth. In a incredibly black city, we can't get uh, laws and legislation through to support locally the things that we want and need. And so really our hands are tied here in Alabama, and it was it was meant to be that way. And so everything from, how land is distributed, how land is controlled, and ultimately, how land is stolen again and again here in Alabama is through legislation that is incredibly difficult to change. So, while I appreciate the people who are doing the work in that policy sphere, I think that it is also, it could be incredibly depressing to, kind of be running on this treadmill going nowhere. And then, the other kind of portion of this is, how much are we asking, of food justice leaders? We're asking you to farm, we're asking you to steward land, we're asking you to, find the land, we're asking you to feed the people, and we're asking you to make these policy changes and, advocate and educate and all of these things. So, being realistic about, my uh, best and highest use of my genius um, is really important in working through kind of this larger system and really surviving it.
Thank you. Um, Please give a virtual actual round of applause to all of my panelists today. There's been lots of information shared in the chat, and I think in the follow-up, if you'd like to remain in contact with them. There was one question we didn't get to. I think Duran or others can answer in the chat from Alan around what are the best land trust models, and if NBFJA is connected to American Farmland Trust. I will say not directly. We did recently take a group of members to the Southeast Land Conservation Conference last month, so that they could learn firsthand about some other land models. So we're hoping to grow our knowledge base in that, and we've been doing a community of practice with Trust for Public Land, so that we can share different opportunities with people around land and land trust models, and we look forward to having a more robust place and system for that on a national level as well as local and regional, is one of our main goals under the Alliance. So again, thank you. I'm not sure if anyone was playing along, if anyone has bingo, uh, feel free to shout it out, let us know. But coming to a place near you soon. We'll have these printed out materials that people can request and use in their respective communities around bingo and just other materials to make this much more accessible. It's no good if the information only lives with a few of us and not many of us. If we are looking to create a different world, then we all have to be a part of this and have some base knowledge and political education around what it is we're working toward in the moment that is now. So definitely encourage you to and offer us feedback. So we're looking to continue to improve this beyond this and continue to make it a more accessible things and other materials. If you have things from your respective communities that would be helpful, let us know. So in the chat, you'll find our web address, as well as connection to our impact report. But I think overall, just to summarize today and close us out and let you get back to your afternoon, the only food system that can't be shut down is one that we build, one that we govern and protect ourselves. Community controlled food, land, housing, infrastructures are just more stable than federal programs. When I used to work even for local city government, I'd be like, the government isn't nimble enough to actually do like human care and to meet some of the needs that people need, like, to sort of create policy and infrastructure, but it's way too big to be nimble and responsive enough in the way that we need it to be as humans. And so normal was already harmful. And so we weren't living at the best. And so for us to just default and take a deep breath to go back to what it was, that just seems like accepting a subpar existence. So normal was food apartheid, normal was political neglect. And so our work, I think, and our charge now is to build local power, collective land stewardship, and institutions that anchor our liberation and to not go back to what we were. And with that, I say support is a verb. It is an active thing that we have to do. It's not words. It's not just us posting on social media. It's not making statements. Like it is an active action of things. And so, our members called us to task. They have their calls to action, and that they want an emphasis on maintaining community awareness and radical political education. They want to focus on growing and distributing food locally, securing land access, building sustainable food networks. They want an agreement um, on the need for both short-term solutions, as Duran talked about, like we need to be able to survive to get to the next phase, immediate and food relief and emergencies, as well as long-term things to build institutions around it so that we don't end up here again. They want to continue balancing immediate food security with building independent, community control, and governed food systems that are rooted in cooperation, education, and land justice. And so with that, then we ask of our philanthropic partners like yourself and others who were on the call previously or not here, we ask that you offer deep, long-term support for this work. And by that, I mean, we need to go as all in as those who oppose us. For some, long term is more than 3 years, but really, I believe we should be funding for life cycles. It takes at least 5 years or more to really see transformational change and long-term change that you want to see, and to offer that stability for people to work through things. And so, what does that mean for us to make a long-term commitment? We need you to use all of your political, social, and financial capital to support frontline food sovereignty and land justice organizations like ourselves and those of our members. And support alternative systems of community care and food systems like co-ops, like mutual aid, like community government funds. Like we recognize that this isn't working for us, so why shouldn't we be supporting what may work for us and is made with us and people and nature at the center of it instead of the opposite? So our survival is gravely at risk. My salvation is yours as well. We may not have created the conditions in which we are currently facing and burdened with, but it is our responsibility to absolve ourselves and to resolve these current issues. No material change comes in comfort. And so this period of discomfort, let it use that to fuel us and to not look to just go back to being in a place of comfort. If we really want to see things change, like it requires us to be uneasy. And don't wait to resource a tomorrow that may never come when you can resource today. Because without today, there is no tomorrow. Don't leave us on the front lines, standing alone. We are the seeds that you have planted. Do not starve us out and expect us to grow. Water, nurture, and care for us, the investments that you have made. So quite frankly, we aren't needed. You aren't needed tomorrow if you take care of us today. And I think, all of us have a task. I think we should wake up every day and ask yourself, how can I work myself out of a job? What power do I have to be and do something different? How can I organize myself, my people, our resources to not exist in perpetuity, but to act with the urgency and integrity worthy of these unprecedented times? So I appreciate your time today, your candor, your listening. I hope that you take this back with you in your respective worlds and your colleagues. And figure out how can support be a verb and how can you join us on the front lines and be a very active partner in this. I appreciate y'all and have a very good afternoon or morning wherever in the world you are.
Thank you so much, Cicely, Chris, Duran, Ryan, and Dominique. This was an incredible, incredible presentation. And just thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. And I hope all of the funders on the call heed those calls to action. And we'll be in touch with the recording and all the links that were popped in the chat and several other resources and summary takeaways. So thank you all. Appreciate your time today. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, have a great afternoon.